What is up, weather enthusiasts? I'm your host, Pat's Path Predictor. Let's get right into the weather. Alright, so here's the situation we have for you, ladies and gentlemen. We have Beryl now approaching the Yucatan Peninsula in the next day or so. It is now also expected to approach Texas in the next 4 days or so, and we have a lot to talk about. Right now, Grand Cayman is getting the outer bands of the hurricane, so is Cuba at this current point in time, as this thing makes its final approach towards the Yucatan Peninsula. Here's the situation right now. Beryl has been gradually weakening due to the influence of the wind shear. It is now a Category 2 hurricane, a high-end Category 2 hurricane with winds of 110 miles per hour. So that's some very good news that we're here to share with you guys today. Minimum central pressure is 974 millibars, so definitely the pressure and the wind speed variation has been a bit more, best way to put it, it's the ratio between the pressure and the wind speed has definitely gotten better over the last few days. Part of this can be attributed to the fact that the storm is expanding in size at this current point. Hurricane tropical storm force winds, at least in retrospect, now extend outward 160 miles from the center compared to where we were before. It has the tropical storm wind field has shrunk a little bit, but and so is the hurricane force winds. But that can be attributed to weakening. But overall, if you go ahead and take a look at the structure compared to where we were a day ago, let's go ahead and go back to 120 frames over here. This was a lot smaller of a system before. Now it's become a lot larger of a system. As you can see right here, we're seeing a lot more of the outer bands start to blow up. You're starting to see a lot more convection firing up and bringing those outer bands to Cuba. You're seeing the overall structure of it grow in size based on satellite, just not the tropical storm force winds or hurricane force winds as of yet. So we're going to have to pay attention to it. The core is still very intact at this current point. There's really no dry air going through it, no dry air really moving through it, which could weaken it. And I'm also noticing the eye is starting to open up again, which, if that's the case, that's going to allow for more ventilation to move through and potentially allow for this thing to either maintain its strength or maybe even intensify, although that is a little bit outlandish at this current point in time. Let's go ahead and read the rest of the advisory. We have hurricane warnings in effect for the Yucatan Peninsula. As in Mexico, we can go ahead and show you the graphics at this current point in time. We have hurricane warnings in effect for the eastern part of the Yucatan Peninsula. We have tropical storm warnings for the western and northern part of the Yucatan Peninsula, as well as all the way down to the border of Mexico and Belize. Tropical storm watch in effect for the northern Belize area. Hurricane watch in effect for the Belize-Mexico border and the area around Cancun. Tulum, Mexico, looks like it's going to be hit by hurricane force winds at this current point in time. And then we don't have any watches or warnings yet by the National Hurricane Center over here, primarily because it's still too far out. We still have 4 days to go before this thing makes landfall, so we're going to have to pay close attention to that as this continues to move on. It is expected to make landfall early in the morning tomorrow in Mexico at this current point, so if you're tuning in, let's go ahead and show you what the forecast discussion is calling for. We're looking at a 105 mile per hour hurricane or 100 mile per hour hurricane at landfall, so either a low-end Category 2 or maybe a high-end Category 1 at landfall at this current point in time. Storm surge is going to be pretty interesting. We can go ahead and show you what the risk is for surge. We're looking at 3 to 5 feet for much of the Yucatan Peninsula. That's going to be very interesting. The winds are going to be the primary threat at this current point. Yes, there's going to be a lot of rainfall with this, but the winds are still a very big threat for you guys in the Yucatan Peninsula and Texas as we get more data and more information to come out. The NHC now wants this thing to strengthen up into a hurricane before making landfall near the U.S.-Mexico border. I've seen some models shift further and further up to the north, potentially advocating for a South Texas landfall, which, if that were the case, that would end up allowing for the system to be over water a lot more. It's going to be over water for the next 2.5 days, and we're going to be seeing a situation where the wind shear, we've seen the trends, the wind shear is on a weakening trend, and we'll have to see if this thing takes full advantage or not. Discussion has this thing as a 75 mile per hour hurricane over as it makes landfall, but it could easily get stronger than that if the wind shear weakens just enough for it to allow to that. Because right now, the wind shear it's forecasted to be in, and we'll show you that in a little bit, is around 15 to 20 knots. So if that gets down a little bit to around 10 to 15, that definitely could allow for strengthening, and we've seen that in the past where essentially a lot of Yucatan systems that come off the Yucatan Peninsula enter the Bay of Campeche and the Gulf of Mexico, feed into those very warm waters, and just essentially take off. We've seen that with Harvey in 2017. We've seen it with other examples. With this one just not coming off the Yucatan, but moving west towards Texas, Hurricane Hannah in 2020, it moved through a very warm area of water, and that's how it was able to get to high-end Category 1 strength. So that's what we're looking at this current point in time. Let's go ahead and show you the global sea surface temperatures to kind of show you what I'm talking about. Where it's at right now is in an area of around 29 degrees Celsius at this current point in the Caribbean Sea, expected to make landfall in the Yucatan Peninsula in the next 24 hours. It's going to be over that very warm water. The warm water is not the issue, nor is the ocean heat content. It's the wind shear. We've been talking about this for several days. We're going to have to keep a very close eye on that at this current point in time. And another thing I'm noticing too with this is just based off the climate reanalyzer, we are seeing a bit of a leveling off, at least temporarily, of the sea surface temperatures. This can most likely be attributed to what Beryl was doing just a little bit, but I'm also noticing a bit of cooling going on across much of the main development region over here. We're starting to see those 28 plus degrees Celsius start to erode and decay and get cooler and all that stuff. Let's go. As a matter of fact, I'm going to go ahead and take a look at the satellite imagery for the Atlantic-wide region at this current point. This is the Eastern Atlantic. Okay, this is not going to really help us. Let's go ahead and go to 30 frames. Just to kind of see. Yeah, there's definitely been some stuff going on. I think part of it can be attributed to just the Sahara air layer really bringing impacts, as well as just tropical wave after tropical wave moving through the main development region and just starting to cool those waters a little bit. What tropical systems tend to do with these kinds of waters is whenever you see a hurricane form, what they tend to do is they cool the waters, especially if they're moving slow enough. Beryl hasn't been moving slow enough to really cool the waters at all. Matter of fact, it's still moving at 18 miles per hour, and it hasn't been moving slow enough to kind of allow for this ocean heat content to cool off. Matter of fact, it's getting worse in a lot of areas right now. Even after Hurricane Beryl, we're seeing 150 to 175 OHC areas all over the place at this current point. We're seeing a couple of areas crack 175 OHC near Jamaica. Yeah, it's still pretty insane. And matter of fact, we can go ahead and show you what we were looking at just a week ago in late June as we were seeing this happen. So let's go ahead and go back to about, I'd say, June 26th right here. Yeah, you weren't seeing nearly as much right here as you are now. You're seeing a lot of these 150 to 175 to even up to 200 OHC areas just blow up across a lot of the Caribbean, and we can go ahead and pull this back up to right here just to show you in comparison. Yeah, you're starting to notice that. You're starting to notice a lot of areas of OHC really firing up despite Beryl moving through the Caribbean Sea. So that's a very big concern, and I told you guys this is going to set the tone for what's going to be happening in the next few weeks or so, so we're going to have to pay attention to that. If we go ahead and show you the wind shear has weakened across much of the Caribbean Sea. Where it's at right now, it's dealing with 15 to 20 knots of wind shear. Definitely going to keep it weakening, but there is no dry air to really stop this thing from happening. The core is still very well intact at this current point in time. Just the wind shear is just still chipping at it, although we have seen a gradual weakening of the wind shear as this thing approaches the Caribbean Sea, the Yucatan Peninsula, and then into the Gulf of Mexico, where it enters a very large pocket of low wind shear as it comes off. So we're going to have to see if that takes full advantage of that or not. Regardless, land interaction is going to weaken Beryl potentially down to a tropical storm as it gets off, and then from there we'll have to see what happens. So let's go ahead and show you the shear forecast and the moisture forecast at this current point in time. Let's go ahead and pull that up right here from the European. We're going to use the 0Z European from earlier this morning just to kind of show you what's going on. The European has this, the wind shear just kind of starting to level off. Part of this shear, I will say, is attributed to the tropical system, so keep that in mind. And then we're going to enter the the Gulf of Mexico. It's going to be entering an area of relatively low wind shear. Again, a lot of this can be attributed to the outflow, and a lot of this can be attributed to the structure itself, but there is going to be a bit of wind shear going into that at this current point in time. We're going to have to pay attention to that at this current point. The European wants this thing to really ramp up in strength based off the pressure I'm noticing. It's going to be in that pocket of low wind shear outside of that outflow that's going to be moving through. So potentially this could take full advantage of the Gulf of Mexico with that lower wind shear if the core stays intact over the Yucatan. But overall, we have been seeing a downtrend of the wind shear. We can go ahead and show you from yesterday. We've seen a little bit of a downtrend there. 2 days ago, we can go ahead and show you that right here. Yeah, significant downtrend from 2 days ago right here. So, yeah, it's definitely something to pay attention to. And a lot of this, once again, can't reiterate this enough, is attributed to the outflow of this, so we're going to have to pay attention. Another thing I want to take a look at too with Beryl is the dry air, just to kind of, not just based off of what we're seeing now, I mean, I will pay attention to that, but also what we're seeing in the Gulf of Mexico. You are seeing a bit of dry air in the Bay of Campeche, but you are seeing an increase of moisture across a lot of these regions. We're seeing a low pressure system move through, and it's going to bring a lot of moisture across a lot of these regions, so we're going to have to pay attention to that right then and right there. And we can go ahead and show you the moisture forecast to see what's going on at this current point in time. So here's what we have going on with the moisture. It's in a very, very large pocket of very deep moisture at this current point. The core has not been disrupted. It will not get disrupted. And as it enters the Gulf of Mexico, it's going to have a lot of moist air going for it at this current point. There is a little bit of dry air in the Bay of Campeche, but there's not going to be much wind shear to get this thing into the core, so I wouldn't be too concerned about the dry air for the storm's situation with where it develops. So overall, very big situation. The NHC is calling for a hurricane to make landfall near the U.S.-Mexico border. I personally think, based off some of the trends we're noticing, I think South Texas looks like the more likely option, especially as we're starting to see, if we're noticing this, a weakening of the Azores High and a weakening of this high-pressure dome over here across much of the south over here, the southern United States, and moving through and allowing for this thing to push further and further north towards Texas. So we're going to have to pay attention to that as we get more information and as we get more data over here. But in the meantime, yeah, this is looking like a very serious situation. One other thing I'm keeping tabs on before we get to the track models and the intensity is Invest 96L, although the odds of it developing are very, very low. It's only at a 10% chance of development. It is going to be moving at westward or west-northwestward at 20 to 25 miles per hour. It's forecast to cross the Yucatan Peninsula and enter the Gulf of Mexico. Gusty winds and locally heavy rainfall is possible at this current point. Overall, not too worried about it. What I am potentially worried about, though, is this thing moving fast and colliding with Beryl. This thing's moving at 23 miles per hour. Beryl's moving at 18. So if we have a situation where Beryl slows down a little bit more and the system catches up with it, we could see a potential tropical cyclone merger right here with this tropical wave right there, which could help reinforce a lot of the problems it's been having with the wind shear and everything like that. So definitely something to keep an eye on, but overall not too concerned with the development at this current point in time. Let's go ahead and show you the track models and the intensity. Track models, once again, have shifted this further north to the U.S.-Mexico border, with almost half of them, or actually more than half of them, now have it making landfall north of the U.S.-Mexico border. It's going to be over the Gulf of Mexico for 2.5 days. It's going to be slowing down quite a bit as it's in the Gulf of Mexico before it approaches Texas or Mexico right there. So it's going to have plenty of time over water, and it's going to have plenty of time to strengthen. We're just going to see how this depends, what this does at this current point. Intensity models are pretty interesting to say at this very least. Intensity models have this thing weakening due to land interaction, and then we're starting to see a bit of a bounce back in the Gulf of Mexico, mainly due to the warm waters and the weaker wind shear as this thing continues to move through. So that's what we're dealing with when it comes to Hurricane Beryl. If you are in Mexico, if you are in Texas, you need to take this very seriously. If you're in South Texas, I would start preparations right now. If you're, I'd say, in my opinion, Corpus Christi South, you absolutely need to pay attention to this. If you're in those areas, I'd start preparing for this, in my opinion, but I would also listen to local officials because they know better than I do. I'm just giving you all the data for you to take a look at. But in the meantime, let's go ahead and show you the hurricane models that we have right here. We're going to go ahead and start with the HMON. Right here with Beryl as it moves towards the Yucatan Peninsula. Here's what we have going on. We're going to use the 10-meter winds in the main sea level pressure. The HMON has this thing moving through as a high-end Category 1 or low-end Category 2 hurricane as it makes landfall in the Yucatan Peninsula. It actually stays over land for, how long is this? About 12 hours, which is pretty interesting. And it is, it is kind of with what the models are forecasting at this current point. However, the quicker this moves over land, the quicker it taps into these Gulf of Mexico waters, and the quicker this could reorganize and reintensify. Now, granted, it is going to take a little time for it to reorganize. It's probably going to take the first day or so for it to do that before it starts to intensify once again as it approaches South Texas as either a strong tropical storm or a weak hurricane at this current point. So we're going to have to pay very close attention to that at this current point in time. South Texas is definitely going to be at risk for this. The risk is definitely going to be heightened if the high pressure dome, the heat dome in the south, weakens faster than anticipated. That's going to push the system further to the north, and we absolutely do not want that. Let's go ahead and show you the HAVS A model. HAVS A is a pretty similar situation. The HAVS A wants this thing to make landfall as a Category 2 system in the Yucatan Peninsula. How long is this going to stay over land? It's going to stay over land for a little less than 12 hours. It's going to be a very fast mover through the Yucatan Peninsula. What this does rapidly weaken due to land interaction, expected to come off as a tropical storm around 50 to 60 miles per hour. It takes that first day to reorganize, then it quickly re-intensifies as it approaches the Mexico coast right there as a hurricane or strong tropical storm. Looking at the HAVS A, it does appear that it's going to be making landfall as around a low to mid-range Category 1 hurricane at this current point in time. Regardless, you're going to have to pay attention to this if you are in the northeast coast of Mexico, and South Texas, because you're going to most likely get a lot of rain with this. Matter of fact, what's the NHC forecasting for rainfall across a lot of these regions? I want to go ahead and pull up their graphics right here, rainfall potential. Yeah, they don't have it officially up for Mexico or Texas yet, but they definitely will in the next day or so. So I would keep a very close eye on that as we get more data and more information. But regardless, you got to watch out for potential intensification, potential quick intensification if this shear starts to weaken a lot more than what we've been seeing in previous model runs. And we have been seeing a significant downtrend over the last few days ago since the system started showing signs of entering the Gulf of Mexico. So let's go ahead and show you the HAVS B run. Let's go ahead and do that very quickly. HAVS B wants this thing to make landfall as a Category 1 or Category 2 system, moves through the Yucatan Peninsula in about 10 or 11 hours. Then it enters the Gulf of Mexico, reorganizes, and re-strengthens. The core definitely gets a lot larger, which is pretty interesting right there. We'll have to see if the eye or the core ends up being that large, or if it'll end up still being compact somewhat, because I know with land interaction, what that does is it expands the eye wall out until it completely collapses. So depending on how quickly this system moves through the Yucatan will depend on how large this gets and how much the eye wall and how much the core of it will collapse. And then it makes landfall as a mid-range Category 1 hurricane, according to the HAVS B right there. So we're going to have to pay attention to that. Last model we're showing you is the H-Wharf. H-Wharf has been pretty interesting, to say the very least. It was advocating for a major hurricane landfall yesterday. As this thing making landfall as a Category 1 or Category 2 hurricane in the Yucatan Peninsula, exits, matter of fact, this thing exits a lot slower. It actually exits in about 14 hours compared to the 10 to 12 hours from the other models, so that's going to be interesting if that does happen. Then it starts to reorganize and re-intensify up to high-end Category 1 strength. Category 2 strength is not impossible. The H-Wharf now wants this as a major hurricane as it approaches the U.S.-Mexico border. South Padre Island especially needs to watch out for this as this system quickly rebuilds and then makes landfall as a 958 millibar system. So yeah, the H-Wharf is still calling for rapid intensification after it enters the Gulf. I want to, do they have any shear on that or anything like that? I'll see if the H-Wharf parent does to kind of see if that is the case at this current point. Yes, they do. All right, yeah, definitely what the H-Wharf is paying attention to is they're not seeing very much shear across much of the Gulf of Mexico. The shear that's right here, a lot of this is just the hurricane or the outflow with it, which is my main concern, because look at this outflow. The outflow gets sucked into this huge area of wind shear over the United States right there, and that's why the H-Wharf really wants this thing to rapidly intensify, because of that increase of ventilation, that major increase of ventilation right there. So what the H-Wharf wants is a good angle for this thing to organize and intensify with the shear. So we're going to have to pay attention to that, as the H-Wharf has been pretty spot on over the last few days or so with Beryl, and we will keep you updated here on the Pat's Path Predictor channel. With that being said, we're going to go ahead and close the video out right here. I really hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you are new. Remember, we are trying to get to 10,000 subscribers before July 17th or on July 17th, which is my 21st birthday. So if you could hit the red subscribe button, that would be much appreciated. Also, once again, like the video, and if you want to come hang out with us at Storms United, be sure to join the Discord server. Link to that is right over there. Happy Independence Day, ladies and gentlemen, and stay safe.